or son is just as exposed because of the internet in their hands, and you can't watch them 24 hours a day. Our partnerships and our team has definitely seen all of those things. We've seen the good people, we've seen the families that are coming through, and they're part of the American story, so to speak. But even the ones that are here or crossing for peaceable reasons or reasons to get away from wherever they're fleeing, they're often the victims or chatteled by those who have a vested interest in evil. And so we see all those things. There are good people coming through. There are good family members, but at the same time, there's plenty of people from countries that were hardly documented years ago. Eastern Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries that were hardly documented at all 5, 6, 7 years ago are now coming in at a regular clip. Chinese nationals, and there's a tick there, Afghanistani, Iranians, and they are here solely because it's open. And you can't necessarily assume that all of them are here for bad things, but they do come from bad places. And I think it's worth a question asked. And I think the thing that's the most hypocritical to me is that as an American, I've been to Germany and they ask you all the questions about why you're here. And, you could be there on a work visa. It could all be on the up and up. They have no problem asking you. And if I swam in from the sea or illegally landing in the plane or some other way, they would stop me and they would arrest me and they would deport me. France, many Latin American countries, they enforce their borders. For some reason, we're not allowed to enforce ours or even ask the question of those. And there are straight up other countries that if you're from if you're from Israel and you try to land in Egypt, you will be turned around if you're not arrested, if you're not interrogated. So, that's been long known. We don't go to that extreme, but we're held as if we do. And that can be kind of frustrating. Just be from a country that they don't like or they're at active war with, and you wouldn't be going anywhere. I don't know who Colombia's offhand. I don't know who Colombia's political enemies are, but I can almost assure you that the way they treat everybody who goes there, it is fair, it is legal, but it is tough. And if you don't have your papers, if you don't have the answers and things don't check out, you will go to jail. And if you're lucky, you'll be deported if you don't get held for a Colombian crime. And so I just find it ironic that in countries that we've helped historically the last 100 years, we get treated as, what are you doing here? Why? Where's your paperwork? Yet countries that have been our enemy, their citizens we're supposed to take in with no questions asked. And it's hard to see the connection as to why that's done. And helping people, we're all for helping people, and morally every human is equal. There are no such thing as illegal human beings, but there are illegal actions. And try that somewhere else, and you will have a very bad day. But for here, our Texas law enforcement, federal law enforcement in Texas, I don't know why they're being hamstrung. They can't do the job they were told to do. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about human trafficking, and when I got into it several years ago as an investigator, I think I was surprised as to the statistics of how many community kids, at least that's what they called them in Florida, where I was looking at. I looked at Broward County mostly, the Miami office. And I remember a presentation back in 2018 or 19 where it must have been 2019, the presentation's about 2018 stats. And they had 152 cases of minors being human trafficked, whether that was solicited or actually taken, anywhere on the spectrum. Of that 152, 137 of them were community kids. And community kids were defined as non-state-wooded children. So not the kids in the foster care system, not kids on the street as homeless people. This was a judge's daughter, several politicians' family members, school teachers' children. So, it's your children. It's not somebody else's children, and it's not a vulnerable population's children. It's them too, but it's also that. And, I live in a very good county in Southwest Florida, and we have at our local malls that have the Apple stores and the Victoria's Secrets and the high-end jewelry stores, and we have reports of teenage girls being followed by people and being tailed to their car. It's happening everywhere, and it happens online in the more affluent areas. It may happen through abduction in safer areas because the children are maybe less guarded, and in poorer areas, sometimes it's an appeal to economics for the children. It's do this, work for me, and then all of a sudden it becomes from something non-sexual to sexual, and it's everywhere. And the misconception I had was it was in isolated places or isolated populations. That it's not. It's everywhere. Your daughter or son is just as exposed. I don't even know who's listening, but I can tell you your child is just as exposed to it because of the internet in their hands, and you can't watch them 24 hours a day. The other thing that I thought was most brutally shocking about human trafficking was the amount of participation by adult women. Now, wholeheartedly, it's adult men that are the Johns or the perpetrators, but In every case I investigated, large or small, there were females in it. And you tend to think of the man in a trench coat in a dirty white van that's taking the kids and selling pictures and the kids to other dirty white, men in vans. And unfortunately, it's not. It's older women that offer economic outs to these girls, or, hey, you could be doing this and you can improve your life if you just do this one little thing. And then it's not that it's one little thing, it's that you can't say no as they ask for more. And all of a sudden there's this water slide. And then it becomes, if I, the mid-career victim, can just recruit a couple girls, kind of like a Ponzi scheme, I don't have to do the bad things anymore, but I can recruit other girls and they'll be fine if they survive, and I'll help them survive. And becomes this rational cycle all the way up to the top female in the story. So those are kind of the two things, is that it's everywhere, and that it's not just dirty people, men doing it. If there's a network of very highly intelligent people, and some of them are females, and that is the two things that shocked me getting into over now. So there's kind of multiple avenues of human trafficking. There's labor and sexual human trafficking have historically been the two ones. I would say migrant trafficking is probably a developing third. That's kind of it's not clearly there for sexual. They're not clearly here just for economic reasons. It's just a family that wants to go from country A to country B, and now they're on this path, and maybe they incur debt to the coyotes or whoever got them from point A to point B. And that debt may be, go live your life in America, but if we need to use your house as a safe house, if we need to use your house as a drug stash or something, like, you incur a debt to this criminal organization, this transnational criminal organization. And for the average family from Guatemala, that is overwhelming. And you have this debt, and these people that hurt you, but also they got you here. So there's many facets to it. So the border does play a part in all of that, whether it's sexual, whether it's labor trafficking, whether it's just people trafficking, movement trafficking. And so the border is a large part of that. It's probably the biggest open one. Airports, seaports are other avenues of entry, but the border is probably, it's so long, it's so big, there's so many places that are both unguarded and guarded, that is probably the biggest geographical area. And then internally to the United States, there's plenty of homegrown American victims, whether they're first, second, third, or 10th generation, that are just as much a victim. And it's not as substantial, but they will get trafficked out. And they also go through the same unchecked borders as they're coming in. So the borders, closing it would put a significant dent in operations. It would bifurcate overseas operations and domestic operations a lot. The fact that a girl in Illinois, a Caucasian girl from a rich suburb in Illinois, Ohio, can be trafficked out of the country, it should be 0%, but it's not. Is it rare? Yes, but it happens. Usually they're trafficked in America, and then they'll find their way out towards the end of their time in con, so to speak. Time in enslavement. And then obviously there's the more bright in your eyes, so to speak, of coming from poor countries, South America, coming to America, the traffics of either labor, sex, or coercive indebtedness. So there's two that anti-predator projects can speak to. Again, just some of it's limited just because of who we protected. We had a victim that about a decade ago was trafficked to a South American country. Through our connections, we were able to work with some government agencies, both on our side and in that country. We were able to locate the woman through families and through some sporadic communication from the victim to her family. In that 10 years, she had two children that had never had freedom. They were born into this slavery. We were able to recapture this individual back from that country. And it wasn't a super exciting operation. Nobody's going to write a movie about it, but it was harrowing in the sense that we were in the bad guy's backyard. And it was clandestine. We moved the woman and the two children out. We were able to get them back into the United States of America. We had assistance from the U.S. government in terms of this undocumented person moving in and their two children. But everybody was very, very cooperative. And the most touching part of that story is those children had never seen a TV. They had seen cartoons as the two operators from our organization were walking them through the airport in Miami. They saw the playground in the international terminal, and they stopped for about 2.5 hours. And very touching that very touching that these two kids wanted to do that. The mom was in tears. I'm very proud of our operators that said, you know what, we have family to get back to. We have our own life, but you know what, we're going to stop And these two kids are going to play in the playground until they're tired. And the boys, the two children were, I think, 8 and 4 years old. So they didn't get tired of the 2.5 hours. And I think we had to convince them to leave for like ice cream, which is something that, yeah, so it was very touching. I'm very proud of our operators for taking that moment and it was such a blessing to remind us what we do. And so they got to play in the playground for the first time, free for the first time. They took them to a hotel. They had room service. They watched cartoons all night. They ordered everything off the menu. And they had a little bit of help or a little bit of sunshine that first night. And then we were able to put them in touch with a victim service organization that not only brought them, healed them psychologically, they got them into a flow here in America and reintegrated back. So that was a very touching case that we were able to repatriate somebody. They're very happy. And as you point, they don't all end up that way, unfortunately. They're not all that easy. We had a case out west in America where there was a U.S. citizen who was also a Mexican citizen. There were some issues with this young lady was killed she was killed. She was taken, tortured, and killed by gang members, probably cartel members in Mexico. She perished. I can't really say much more, but it was kind of left hand, right hand in terms of government agencies helping and not helping. And is she an American who died in Mexico or a Mexican who died in Mexico? And who cares and whatever. And, the victim had been identified. It was over for the family, but the family did not have closure. They didn't get the answers. They knew she was dead, but they didn't know her last moments. She didn't know how she got there, how she did those things, or, what exactly happened. We were able to answer a lot of those questions. And I was saying that the agents of the various agencies that helps, the individuals, were great. They were very cooperative, having worked for the government. You, the agent, and you as part of a bigger machine are not always aligned. So the agents were great, but it was sad that the only person who attended the family's funeral was a representative from our organization. It was just a statistical victim in some people's eyes. And that's an unfortunate part. I've been on both sides of it. We don't have all the resources on the federal government to chase down every lead. And it does get kind of murky where it's like, well, they're an expat. They're in another country. They got killed. Whose responsibility is that? They're finding the FBI. How many resources do I have? How much time do I have? Is something bigger brewing? And that is a calculus that the average person doesn't expect the U.S. government to make, but they have to. So I'm not in defense of it, but it's not as simple as all victims are treated the same all the time. We would love that. So our motto at Anti-Predator Project is standing in the void of justice, because sometimes what law enforcement can do, what they can do, what they want to do, it could be a gap, and we try to fill that gap when possible. Anti-Predator Project, and I work for another company called Goliath Cybersecurity Group. We are entering into a partnership together to focus on educating families, those with teens, those with young children, to focus on the physical security and the anti-human trafficking stuff, and the cybersecurity, the knowledge of what children have access to and how to protect them digitally in a largely digital world, which is where we're overwhelmingly seeing the entry point of human trafficking into these families' lives. So know what's going on. It is something to be fearful of, but you do not need to run around in fearful panic. The best families are the ones that communicate with their children, talk to their children. A lot of times, especially in upper class families, but even in lower class families, when the parents don't communicate, the kids look for attention elsewhere. And whether that's a son or a daughter, that typically we'll use the archetype of, I think, usually a daughter. Those traffickers are waiting to watch. They may be coming as a teenage boyfriend, and that teenage boyfriend is being guided by a creepy uncle that's actually a human trafficker, but using his nephew as the Romeo pimp, as it's called in the industry. And he comes in and says, "Baby, I love you. I'd never yell at you like your dad did." A strong parental presence, whether it's just a mom, whether it's just a dad, ideally two parents. Strong parental parents are a great mitigator against what typically happens. We usually see that it's from disenfranchised kids who feel like nobody's on the team, nobody understands them, they're going through something, whether it's identity crisis or sexual identity crisis, whatever the case is, and they feel alone. And parents don't know what they have access to on their phones. They don't understand. They don't have the protections. They don't know who they're talking to. And the kids with high self-esteem and high confidence, and I'm not saying super high, I'm saying like higher than low, are the ones that don't need to search outside. They don't need to they don't feel the need in their own head to getting into a relationship where, I'm 14-year-old girl, I sleep with my 15-year-old boyfriend, he's going to love me. Does every teenager go through something like that? I'm sure, but we're talking outside the margins here where if I sleep with my boyfriend, he'll love me. everybody has to kind of go through teenage relationships. We're not talking about that. When the teenage boyfriend asks you to sleep with his friend because you need to prove you love him, like the teenagers who are above the cuff are going to be like, that's not a normal request of a relationship. The ones who are emotionally injured or emotionally disconnected from the parents are going to say, you know what, I want this guy's approval. I'm going to do this and I'm going to sleep with his best friend. And then that starts a path. And it's not really his best friend. It's a work associate. It's somebody you need to. And then she says no. And then she finds out she can't say no because they'll put her pictures all over the internet that she's a slut and a whore and all these other things. So the point is we're a highly vulnerable population because of their own psychology. And the best thing you can do as a parent is being plugged in to their psychology to be that positive place that they can go back to. And our cyber company is trying to educate parents on the preventative steps to allow the children to have a full life, especially with technology. It's great, but how do you have a full life balanced with protecting the children? And that's an initiative that we're going to be launching in the next couple of months together. So kind of stay tuned, and when it's up and running, Melissa, I can get it back to you for parents in Texas. And it's a process. You're not going to solve it. There's not one bit of technology that's going to protect your kids like the process of being connected to your kids.